Hello, people. How's it going? How's it going? Oh, the picture looks nice. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened in my last video. With the last minute or so, it was all choppy and weird. I don't know what happened there, but hopefully this one doesn't have that problem. Now I'm going to read the book review I did on my blog site of this book. I wrote on my blog site. You can also read the review I'm about to read. So let's see. Killing Jesus by Bill O'Reilly and Martin Dugard. Both are Catholics, by the way. This may be a longer review than normal. My mom got me to read this book, as she was in the middle of reading it herself. First of all, the authors are Catholic, and I am not. I'm a Messianic Jew. So we are not going to agree on certain points in Jesus, and even some aspects of how the Jewish people, along the Jewish leadership and Romans, are portrayed. Believe me, I don't. First of all, the book itself is worth reading, which it is. Don't get me wrong, it's worth reading despite the parts I question. I will explain it at the end. I question the moments that scripture is quoted but not told where it's being taken from. If an author doesn't tell you where they're getting their quotes, I question the quotes worth taking seriously, and I do. If an author is going to use a quote from scripture, he need to tell you where it is in the scriptures. And they don't. And the two authors only a few times give us reference points to their quotes. They do. Now let me just finish this first. I am being a little pedantic on this because if you are the author are going to write a book about Jesus, let alone any other historical person, you shouldn't be avoiding telling the reader where you got your information. The book starts with Julius Caesar and goes from there, which is done well, but I don't think it was needed to start with. Don't think you need to go that far back. So it feels like filler to the story it didn't need. It does. It feels like filler. A lot of the book feels like filler. The story didn't need interesting filler, but was it needed? You get a good general view of Roman history and the emperors that followed into the life, ministry, and death of Augustus and Tiberius. More good stuff, but was it really needed as much as is written? You get the idea from the book that all Romans were brutal and enjoyed killing and crucifying people, and you do. It's one of my problems with it. It's true the Roman Empire was brutal, and it was, and it didn't take too kindly to possible rebellions, which it didn't, but it wasn't completely ruled by people who enjoyed killing. Even the scriptures show Romans at times in a positive light. I think the authors were trying to paint a very one-sided image of the Roman Empire, and that is all they enjoyed. They all enjoyed crucifying people. King Herod the Great is pretty much the most accurate of the main characters in personality. He was a monster, and he certainly wasn't against slaughtering children to stay in power. King Herod King Herod Antipas, his son, is written very well also, very accurate, because like in his father, it was a monster, and he was. Might have been worse than his father. I will say that Pontius Pilate is written fairly well, and accurate to his attitude and character. A good contrast to the story of the Roman centurion in Acts 10 to 1 to 2. As for the Jewish leadership, and to be fair, it's fairly accurate that they saw Jesus as a threat to their power and standing with the people and the Roman Empire. But again, like the Romans in the book, not all the leadership were against Jesus, and they weren't. It might be my second biggest issue with the authors. The people, both Jews and Romans, are portrayed as stereotypes and not actual people of their time and place in history. The Romans are portrayed as psychopaths, and they are. I mean, I know I'm deviating from this for a reason. Well, from what I wrote down. Make it look better. But they are portrayed as psychopaths. Yes, the Roman Empire had its problems. The Roman Empire was brutal. But they weren't all brutal. Okay, the Romans are portrayed as all psychopaths. The Jews as all Christ deniers, and Jesus as well. He's not really the main character in his own book. And that is true. He's not the main character in this book. If you read it, you get the distinct impression the authors were trying very hard to keep it as historically as possible, but to avoid any spiritual ramifications, any theological ramifications, anything that might upset somebody. Because this is Jesus I would follow. He's not really the main character in his own book. I get the impression the author states this in the book, that they were trying to say that they were going to try and stay neutral on the major issues of the life, ministry, and death of the main character. And they did, to the point where I'm not really sure anybody would actually follow him or listen to him talk. I get the impression the authors really wished Jesus had done less, and that less would have been written by anyone at the time. Jesus seems to be floating through the story, and yes, here and there events were recorded and discussed. But it's almost as if the authors were just can't report what actually is written, so they have to slightly alter it a bit or simply ignore huge parts of his life. Let me put it this way: I wouldn't follow his version of Jesus, and I wouldn't. This isn't Jesus of Scripture. This is a Jesus of a liberal view of him at the worst, or a Jesus completely not really sure what is happening, but thinks he knows what he is doing. And hopefully it turns out the way he hopes it will. Sounds like the Jesus from the greatest story ever told. Don't get me started on that movie. That was terrible. Most of this book is about the people around Jesus, which is true, which is fine, and not much about Jesus. Yet in the same book, there's something worth reading about, but it's not all wrong. It just feels like a one-sided character study of the Romans and the Jews, and a little bit of the life and ministry of Jesus. Though it is one-sided, I think way too much. It's not wrong at some points. The Romans were brutal, but not all of them. Not all the Jewish leadership rejected Jesus, or were more concerned with staying in power. Not all of them were that concerned. The Pharisee Nicodemus coming to Jesus to talk to him about his message testifies that not all the Pharisees wanted him dead. I think my issue is simple. There's no balance of the characters involved in this book. They're either all evil or they're all good. To write about such a subject, there has to be a balance, even in the worst of characters, like King Herod the Great, Pontius Pilate, and even the leadership of the Jews in Caiaphas and Ananias, who really were very corrupt and saw Jesus as a threat to their power and wealth, and they were. Ananias and Caiaphas were scoundrels. They were corrupt. They were not. They were the wrong people in leadership. Jesus in this book, where am I here? Jesus in this book isn't really presented as a Jewish Messiah, but more someone trying to be a Jewish Messiah and hoping he is. It's my view anyway. I didn't dislike this book, and I didn't. I just disagreed with some aspects and the lack of balance in historical personalities involved. As for the authors of this book, I have read others of theirs, and I like them. I just don't agree with some of the points in this particular book. I did like Killing Pat. That was a good one. Come on. I really need to slow down. I really think that's part of the problem. I talk too freaking fast. But back to the book. The book is worth reading. I mean, it does have a pretty good character study. As long as you realize that a lot of it is a one-sided story, a one-sided look at the life of these people. Yeah, Pontius Pilate was a lot of things, but he had more than one side to him. The Romans weren't all brutal. The Jews weren't all Christ deniers. Jesus, I think it might be my biggest problem with the book, is this is not a Jesus I would listen to, let alone follow. They tried so hard to almost make it more secular in his life. And they tried to make it more secular, claiming they're trying to just be historical, but at the same time, they made a Jesus who really, I don't think, if he were alive, has no idea what he's doing, has no idea what's happening. He's hoping he's the Messiah. He's hoping that everything works out, and my mom, I'm less glad my mom wrote it. It gives me a chance to talk to her about such things. The book itself is not one of their better ones. I mean, Killing Patton was a far better book. It really was. But to me, it's just full of stereotypes. It's full of stereotypes of the Romans, of the Jews, of Jesus, of the events of the first century. I mean, I think it tries to be fair. I can give them that. I think they tried to be fair. I think they wanted to be fair, but they left out about 95% of Jesus' life and his message and everything else. And I'm serious. If they are going to quote scripture, they need to tell you where they're getting it from. Because a lot of the quotes he has, he's not telling you where they are. They're not going to tell you where they are. then they should not be listened to because they may be lying to you, or they're writing their own thoughts of what it should be, or they've rewritten what they want it to be. This is why I always have a problem with these authors. It's like if you're going to quote something like that, you need to tell the reader where you got the quote. If you're not telling the reader where you got the quote, the reader has no obligation to believe you. You could be making this stuff up, and some of those quotes sound more like they're just making it up because this is what they wanted to say instead of what it is saying. I mean, I've studied enough of the Roman Empire. I've studied enough of Jewish history. I am a Messianic Jew, but this Jesus I wouldn't follow. I wouldn't bother. He doesn't come across as being a full rounded anything. This is unfortunate because they did so well in the Killing Patent book. I think the problem with this book is that they were really trying to minimize Jesus' message, who he was. If you don't get the impression this is the Son of God, you don't really get that. Not really. And they do pick and choose certain events, and I wonder why. And they don't. They seem to interpret them not the way it's written down, but the way they want it to be, or the way they like to think it was really. But anyway, I would recommend the book because it's interesting. How some people will write a book about a very important subject, and yet you get nothing really out of it that hasn't been done before. And that's another thing about this book. It has been done before. I can name several books that this book sounds like. But anyway, um, a little longer than I planned. But, there were several people on for a few minutes. Anyway, I will probably try to do another video in about an hour after I do a few smaller videos on my phone. I have two places I do videos. My Facebook page and my phone videos. Anyway, those get posted on my Instagram and my Facebook page, just like this. Anyway, take care of yourselves, people. I'll be back in about an hour with a different subject, hopefully. Unless these three people want to ask me a question. I see you. I see you, three people. How you doing? Doing well? You're cooler than where I'm living. It's hot here in Minnesota. But anyway. But anyway, I would read it. Just take it with a very large grain of salt that you're really dealing with authors whose Catholicism is a little questionable, whose Bible knowledge is a little questionable. And if they're not, and as I keep repeating, because there's a reason, they don't tell you where the verses are that they're quoting, they're making it up. That's how I view it. I'm sorry, but that's how I view it. All right, I'll be back in about an hour, people. Behave yourselves, because you know I don't know how. Later, later. I'll be back in about an hour. Later, later. Oh yeah, like, subscribe, comment, share.